then from here, I'm coming from this angle.
Oh yeah, this is better.
Better?
Because then it just feels like I'm less
Awesome.
tall, and then my head was right here, so I felt like I was wearing a crown.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I feel tall too.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's better. Yeah, I like the art. Do you want to be in?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Like
Almost like an interview.
yeah,
Okay.
like interview style. Okay, this is still going. Let's see. That should be good too. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think this works, right?
Yeah?
It's more casual.
Yeah.
It feels like,
Yeah, there we go.
yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And I can speak to you.
You
or
you
the
feel
camera.
you won't feel like you're just speaking to the camera. You're actually speaking to a person. I think that I know I've done webinars where I'm like, I don't see anyone, and it feels so awkward. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. We are doing a story on Untold Story of Lao Refugee Women, and some of these stories are through the eyes of their children. Today we have Wanchay with us, and she is going to be sharing a little bit about what she has learned through the eyes of her mother, who has since passed away. But we are excited to hear her story, her journey as a Lao refugee woman, and let's get started.
Well, thank you so much, Laura, for having me. This is very exciting to be a part of this project. I think it's long overdue for sure.
Definitely.
We all have so many stories, extraordinary stories,
Yes.
stories of heroism and struggle, and then overcoming those struggles, building a new life. And so I'm really, really glad that you asked me to be a part of this, to share my story, but also to be a part of the collective, because I think if we don't put these stories down and save them for our next generation, for our children and grandchildren,
They
then
won't know.
yeah, they'll be
Yeah.
lost.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Let's pause there.
Okay.
I just want to
So that's
straighten
your
it.
little intro. Then do you just want me to like go into the story, what I remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be good. Like it's okay, perfect.
And if I'm speaking too quickly, I can slow down too.
Oh, you're fine.
I always feel like I'm on a rush.
No, take your time. Okay.
So, as Laura mentioned, my name is Wanchay, or Wanchay, last name Chanthadouangsy. I have since married and taken on the name Itmish. So, I have a unique perspective in that I don't quite remember what Lao was when I was there. I was only 6 months old when we had crossed over, but I do remember when we arrived in the U.S. and how our life began here. So this is really a story of my mother, who, as Laura mentioned, has since passed, as she told it to me and as I remember it. We are from a southern Lao province called Savannakhet. And in fact, both my parents are from a very tiny rural town called Samia. And I have visited a couple times, had the opportunity, and I'm so glad I took advantage of it, to go with my parents while they were both alive. So from the small town, my parents moved to Savannakhet. And they then had the opportunity to go to study to become OB nurses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so how I know that is because we would get newsletters from this publication called the Mekong Circle, which was a cooperative of Filipina nurses
Okay.
and Lao. It was a school that they were teaching Lao people to learn the trade and become a nurse. So both my parents actually graduated and became nurses, and then of course the Vietnam War came to Lao, and unfortunately that changed everyone's lives, whether you were for or against. It forced you to make a decision.
Right.
One of those decisions was my father ended up fighting for the Lao military. It was more or less a militia, because he wasn't so formalized in training. It was pretty much, what are we going to do to defend our home at that time. So he had gone to fight, and my mom was left with myself and two older brothers, and who at the time were probably 2 and 4. So imagine having to fend for yourself, knowing that your country was being invaded, and from within, because there were obviously people within the government with the coup trying to take over. So my father and mother lost contact for a while, and she did not know if he was alive or dead. It turns out that he was still alive, but he had been detained in a prison camp that they called seminar camps. Growing up, we always heard about seminar, which I never quite put together that the word was seminar. So they were retraining or brainwashing schools to get these former soldiers in line with the communist regime and thought. So my mother had to fend for herself and raise 3 children. She had some family around her, but most of her family were in Simia while she was in Savannakhet. She did survive by doing what most women in trying times do, which is try to make $1, try to sell anything, try to find a way to buy something and resell it. So she sold iced coffees, she bought cigarettes and re-rolled them to make them smaller to sell them. She ended up buying candy and selling and anything that she could to keep our stomachs full. And but a miracle happened where she befriended a Thai lady who was a merchant, and she was allowed to cross the Mekong River, which separates Thailand and Laos from Savannakhet. And her friend found out that her husband, my father, was still alive.
Oh, wow.
And he had crossed the Mekong and ended up in a refugee camp across the way.
Wow.
So through this friend, she was able to send messages. And before her friend could go into Laos or go into Thailand, they would search all of her packages. So what her friend did was she would smuggle notes in her hair bun.
Oh my goodness.
And that's how my parents communicated. And when she found out that my father was in the refugee camp, she decided that there was no other choice but to follow him. And this by no means was an easy feat. There were armed guard soldiers along the Mekong River, first of all, and second of all, you had to know someone who had a boat, and third, that they were willing to allow you in that boat. And
because their lives are at risk as well. If they're caught smuggling you over, they would get killed too. So it's kind of a huge risk. So finding someone to do that is definitely huge.
Exactly. And on top of that, you had to pay them. And so when you're selling iced coffees and candy, it would take a while to come up with that money. Yeah. So, but my mom was determined. She ended up waiting just very patiently and collecting money and saving money to have enough for this boatsman. Yeah. And on the day that, or the night time, that we were going to leave, she was swindled. Somebody...
Carmelo, go pee! So we're gonna look in the.
Okay, yeah.
So then that way it doesn't feel like we're talking to each other.
Okay, sure.
Like we're gonna talk to the crowd.
Yes.
That way.
Okay.
So I'm gonna respond to you through here.
Okay. So the night that we were supposed to get into the boat and cross the Mekong, my mom had given the money to someone she had trusted, and unfortunately she was swindled. That person took the money and did not give it to the boatsman.
Oh no.
And instead said that she could take her sons and then I would come with my mother a later date. And my mom, knowing how the world was at the time, which was chaotic, knew instinctually and in her heart that she could not separate her family. So she decided we would all stay back and let that other boat go. And so it took more time for my mom to scramble up more money to finally pay her passage. And in this time, my father, of course, was waiting for us, and when we didn't appear the day we were supposed to, he became very frightened. However, given the tenacity of most Lao women, you know, you don't let setbacks take you down, and you keep going and you keep trying. And so finally she came up with the money again, and it was how my mom described it, a very dark night, which was in our favor. And my uncle had helped us down a very steep riverbank, and the boat was waiting for us there. We all got in, and my mom said that it was a miracle that I made not a sound, not a peep. I was such a good baby. I was 6 months old.
Aww.
And so we made it across safely.
Wow.
Nobody saw us, nobody heard us. And once we reached the other side of the Mekong, in Thailand, we were reunited with my father, and we ended up at the same refugee camp, which is in Ubon, Ratchathani. And that was the beginning of the story of our journey here.
Wow.
We spent almost 3 years at the refugee camp. So my youngest brother was actually born in the refugee camp. And they had enough facilities there for us to survive. Of course, it wasn't ideal, but we ended up being accepted. We had applied to different countries, France, Australia, and the United States. My father was set on coming to the United States. He had his heart here because an uncle of his had already arrived, and he was sponsoring us.
Wow.
So, but it took a long time for us to be accepted, and it was the same day that Australia had accepted that my father was going to the office to say, yes, we're going to Australia.
Wow.
That America decided that they would accept our application. So I could have almost been speaking to you today in a completely different accent. But we ended up here in Elgin, Illinois.
Wow.
And that was in 1978 in November. We came through LA. That was the first time any of us, of course, had flown on a plane. Literally, shirts on our back, not a penny to our name. And we ended up in November in Chicago during a blizzard.
Oh my goodness.
So that was our first encounter with snow.
Wow.
And in our little basement apartment that was freezing,
Oh my gosh.
I remember my mom taking all of her kids and huddling us together when the snow fell, because she literally thought the world was ending.
Oh my goodness.
Having never seen snow before or experiencing this cold,
Oh
that
my
this
goodness.
was,
Culture shock.
Yes, definitely. And she's only heard of snow, right? But to
Yeah.
actually be in the middle of it, see it falling, have it touch your skin when you come from a tropical world, this was something she could have never imagined for herself.
Wow.
And so we did what most Lao refugee families did in the community. We got together almost every weekend. We ate food, had parties. My father was one of the first presidents of the Lao Association in Elgin, and he got an engineering, a welding certificate, so he became a welder. My mom went and worked in the factories.
You know, it gives me chills as you're telling me this story because of how similar my story is when I shared in my book about the journey and my mom not knowing if my dad was still alive or dead, and the smuggling and the going across the boat and, all this stuff. Like, I just can't imagine actually being in the moment and being in your mother's shoes and having 3 small children and not knowing what to do.
Exactly.
And just fearing for her life.
Yeah.
Her life and also the children's lives. It must have been a scary moment.
Yeah, yeah. I think when you're faced with no other options, I think you just take every moment right as it comes.
Yeah.
And so the fear of the unknown was no longer there. She knew she had to make decisions for the betterment of herself and her children. And as a mother now myself, every day I see like how precious this life is, this beautiful soul, and I could not imagine being in that chaos, that turbulence of war. There were soldiers everywhere.
Yeah.
There was fires and bullets and people being hung and
Killed in front of each other, and oh my gosh.
And in the middle of that, you still have to raise 3 kids.
Yeah.
And try to find some goodness in the world, some hope that keeps you going.
Yeah.
Because that's what our Lao refugee story is that no matter what, somehow every obstacle thrown our way, we use that as a means to propel us further. Yeah. So she and my father were both very big advocates of education. Yeah. So we could not even speak English, but yet they went and got their ESL. They got their driver's license, and I know there was a test that was floating around that helped them. But
we won't talk about that one, right?
But they definitely, you had to drive in this country, right? You had to get a job. We started on welfare, I don't think it was even more than a couple of months. I used to call it color money. Yeah. Because
it used to be in the paper booklets.
Yes. Yeah, there were little coupons for food.
Yeah.
But, they were resilient and they kept going. They woke up 3 in the morning, scraped the frost off the windows of the cars and drove through blizzards and ice and storms just to get to the factory on time. And then we grew up as very independent children. The term is latchkey kids, probably not appropriate nowadays, but my older brother had a key and we all walked home. And we opened the door, and
in the cold. We walked a long way.
Yeah, we did.
We had to walk a long way in the cold. Oh my gosh, I remember those days.
There was hardly any pickup lines or buses or the luxuries that our kids have today.
Exactly.
But
Ubers and
yes.
Yes.
We would pull up a chair to the stove and fry an egg or cook a package of ramen and fed ourselves until our parents got home. So fast forward through our years in Elgin, we all ended up going through the U46 school system, and all 4 of us went to college and graduated with degrees. I myself went to Augustana College and then ended up with a bachelor's in English and a minor in biology and French.
Oh my goodness.
And then didn't know what I was going to do with all of this. So I ended up applying to law school.
That's so
and
amazing.
went to DePaul University College of Law in downtown Chicago. And at that time, I didn't know many other Lao
Yeah.
refugees that had gone to law school.
That is amazing. You're probably one of the first.
Yeah, I might be.
Yeah.
I know I met some in different Asian organizations that we were involved in, different states that were going through at the same time. We ended up opening up a law office in Elgin, and that transformed into a telecommunications consulting company called LCC Telecom.
Okay.
And I have 2 partners, and we're very proud of what we built. But and looking back, it was all because of my mom and her decisions.
Wow.
Every decision that she made,
It propped you to where you are today.
Exactly. The sacrifices of work, multiple jobs, saving money, being able to allow a female Lao girl to go to college was a big deal, because I went away for 7 years.
Oh my
and
goodness.
that's hard. It's hard for any parents, but for moms particularly, to let their children go. But given that we came from such traumatic experiences, to let your child try to live on their own and get an education. And I traveled. I did the most traveling I could pack in my 20s. Because the deal was, once I was done with education, I had to come back home. So I went on foreign terms. I went all through Asia and through Europe. Any chance I could get to travel abroad, I would. It's just been, a passion of mine to seek out how other people live and their cultures and make those connections. Because I feel like as refugees, and especially as women, we do have this story to tell. And as much as we can share it and experience other people's stories, then we know that we have a chance for our own children, that this world could be better, that there could be a world without war, there could be a world without conflict and displacement, and these terrible decisions that people have to make because of some political strife. Like, it doesn't have to happen. And I think as long as we're connecting and continuing to spread that our experiences and information, it might make someone think twice about, is this really worth it to get to this point for a country?
It's good to stop it anyway, so it's not too long.
No, and you can, of course, edit.
That way we could edit it. Oh my goodness, that's just so amazing. I mean, just being a Lao lawyer and being a female lawyer, how did your parents feel the day that you graduated and become officially a lawyer?
It was very sweet. They're very humble and simple people. Dining out to us was going to McDonald's. That was like a huge event. So when I did graduate from law school, my mom threw me a huge party. It was at a banquet at a restaurant here in Elgin, and she just was grinning ear to ear. You could tell, and we had a band, and it was the Lao band, and we danced and ate food, and she surprised me. She actually surprised me with a car. And, and that, I knew it took a lot for her to be able to get that. But the funny thing about Lao women is we happen to be very lucky. And by that, I mean when there's games of chance or an opportunity to put your name in a raffle or a lottery. So she happened to love slots.
She won?
Yes.
And she bought you a car?
Yes. She had the intention of buying me a car, but she didn't know how she would get there.
Wow.
And so she went one day to play the slot machines, and It was a quarter machine with sevens.
Oh, wow.
And I think it was like $3, and she hit the jackpot.
That
She
Victoria
won.
Casino that everyone lost a lot of crazy money to.
Yeah,
Yes.
but yeah,
But
she
I'm
hit
glad
the
she
jackpot.
at least won.
Yeah,
She
it
hit the
was-
jackpot.
It was $25,000.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
and
So she used it to buy you a car.
Yeah,
That's so amazing.
In many ways, it's kind of, I always think that life balances itself out, right?
Yeah,
So
it
through
does.
the struggle and the
Yeah.
lowest points, like she was able to see a whole different world, a whole different way of living in America, and see her children all thrive and become better versions of themselves and successful in whatever endeavor they chose.
Yeah.
And so it was, unfortunately she passed away pretty young.
Yeah.
She was only 60, and
Wow.
she was diagnosed with cervical cancer.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it was already a little too late. She was already at stage 4 when we got the diagnosis.
Wow.
And we had 4 months, at April in fact.
Oh my goodness.
And the anniversary of her death is April 15th,
oh
tax
my
day,
goodness.
which is coming up
Coming
soon.
up.
Yeah, so this is very appropriate timing.
Nice.
But she was always adamant of us filing our taxes on time.
Oh.
So it's appropriate that she goes on the day that
oh my goodness.
we are reminded of her
Aw.
passing. But during those months, I spent a lot of time with her in the hospital,
Yeah.
taking her back and forth to chemo and sleeping overnight at Sherman, and we got to say a lot of things that sometimes mothers and daughters don't talk about, because as you're growing up, we're very private people.
Yes.
And mothers and daughters sometimes don't share everything, including stories of their past or what's happening now. And I see it as a gift, even though of course I miss her dearly, and I wish she was here to see my daughter.
Aww.
But we were able to communicate on a level that I think that was the opportunity that we had, knowing that we had a definitive amount of time left. So, the love endures, like I feel her with me every day. She used to ride in my car in the passenger seat and always look for hawks flying. And so that's her sign for me. Anytime you see a hawk in our backyard or driving, I say a big hello and send her a big hug.
So speaking of your mom, if she were in front of you today right now, and you can speak to the audience and share, what would you say to her?
Many things. Of course, I love you, Mom, and thank you, because I don't think I could have ever become the person, the woman that I am today, and the mother that I am today without your unconditional love. It never wavered, regardless of the disappointments she may have had or the worry that I caused her. Because I was always bouncing around from country to country and, barely communicating sometimes my whereabouts, just because back then we didn't have internet and it was mail letters.
Carmelo, turn that off. Carmelo. 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 Oh, he fell asleep.
Oh. Oh, poor
Turn it
thing.
off. Because we're recording. Okay, sorry.
Should I start that over?
No, just from where
Okay.
you are, because I
Okay,
can always
sure.
edit those parts.
Yes, she was the joy
Hold
and
on,
the
it's still
light.
on.
Okay.
Carmelo! Go in the room! Then turn this off, because we're recording. It's too loud.
Aw.
Okay.
She was definitely the joy and the light in all of our lives as a family.